Okay, picking up on page 329, we're finishing up on the issues of technology issues and some of the things that can happen. And they talk about some trade-offs. And, manual data entry is slower and more expensive, but it also might allow you that timing issue where, computers are being used an awful lot during the middle of the day. Perhaps that's not the best time to do these things. So in order for you to have the best technology for doing input, you probably need some pretty robust computing. Okay. The next thing they talk about security controls. Output must be accurate, complete, and current. Those kind of things. Output security protects the privacy rights and shields the organization from proprietary data or theft of unauthorized data. And use specific procedures to ensure that the output is delivered to the authorized recipient, not just broadcast to anyone. So shared sensitive reports and you got to make sure you don't, like if you had a production run for a report and then you aborted it or it was out of date, you need to shred those things and get rid of them. So there's an awful lot of issues. The issues I told you about where I got so frustrated with the users leaving sensitive data around that I actually took that feature away from them. So they could not possibly produce anything that had privacy data in it. That's an extreme measure, but it actually works. Okay. The next one talks about input security and control. And consider a banking application for just a second. I want to make sure, I'd want to have an awful lot of input controls, wouldn't you? Okay. So every input must be correct, complete, and secure. It's got to meet all three. Every piece of information should be traceable back to where it came from. Yeah. And the procedures needed for handling the source documents to ensure the data has not been lost before it goes through the system. And the audit trails. A typical bank, for example, if you were... This is how your bank probably works. They don't keep like a database item that has your current balance in it. That's not how it's designed. Instead, they have a list of transactions. So they have like a beginning balance at the beginning of the month. And then it has all these transactions that you can figure, deposits and withdrawals. So you could, for example, call them on the phone and say, what was my bank balance at 3:24 p.m. last Tuesday? And they could tell you precisely what your account balance was at that time by just replaying all the transactions. Now, these transactions contain all sorts of cool audit information. When it occurred, where it occurred. In the financial transactions that we did, we recorded the machine name, the person logged onto the machine, the date and time of the occurrence, what type of transaction it was, and a list of transaction codes that you could travel it all back. So it was a complete audit log. So no one could come back and say, oh no, it wasn't me that did that. And you go, just a second. Yes, sitting at your machine, logged in as you, last Tuesday, you deleted that record. It says so right here. Oh, well, yeah, audit logs. Very powerful. Okay. On page 331, they basically talk about, how we're going to transition to the next chapter, essentially. They talk, once again, about modular design. I think I covered the object-oriented programming in the last video, my 5-minute rant on object-oriented programming. So I won't repeat that rant here. Prototyping is pretty doggone cool way of doing things. They make a kind of a distinction between system prototyping and design prototyping in the next couple of pages. It's kind of an interesting read. Then they talk about, on the 332, they talk about trade-offs. That, input's got to be correct, complete, and you got to make sure you avoid misunderstandings. That, when you're designing these things, you got to make sure that you're talking the same language. That's a problem. And that you got to make sure you have these accurate specifications. That managers can evaluate working models more effectively than paper specification. Give them something to kind of work with. Don't give them a piece of paper and say, "Is this what you want?" They're gonna go, "I ain't got time to read that." Come on, you know what managers will read and won't read. Come on. Okay, so system analysts can use prototype to develop testing and training procedures before the thing already gets in place. Wouldn't it be kind of cool? Put your prototype together and go, wow, this is going to be a little weird. Let's go ahead and work up some training for this. So you already have the training developed long before the thing gets produced. Kind of cool. Prototyping reduce the risk of having some financial exposure. And there's some problems. You know, the rapid pace of development can create quality problems because you're moving so quickly that you actually could miss something. It's possible. Other system requirements such as reliability and maintaining aren't really useful in a prototype environment. You know, while you're prototyping something, you're not really thinking about reliability. You're not really thinking about maintainability during that phase, during that prototyping phase. And then, of course, in a very complex scenario, it might be too expensive to produce a prototype that can do the things that you want it to do and just not even applicable. Okay, on the bottom, page 333, we're going to go through the chapter summaries to make sure we got everything. So here we go. The purpose of system design is to create a physical model of the system that satisfies the design requirements. Yep, cool. And to create a transparent interface. Transparent is the term they use. It means the user interface should be so obvious and so useful that you can barely even tell that it's there. That's the transparency part. Talks about it should be easy to learn and use. It enhances the user productivity rather than makes it worse. Makes it easy to obtain help or correct errors. Minimize the data input problems. Provides feedback. Creates an attractive layout and design, and uses familiar terms and images that they know. Talk about printed reports, including detailed exception and summary reports. Various zones in a document, talking about the headers and the control zones. Input methods, including batch and online, and different types of input media and procedures. And then finally, the security and controls on both input and output. Okay, whew, this was a long chapter, but we're done. And we'll see you again at the next chapter.